Welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein, and this week, as every week, we talk about issues that have to do with young people, with education, sometimes with the political difficulties that come along with all those things, all those human things that people don't get or do get in a different kind of way. And this week, we're going to be talking about a particular aspect of education. Now, we watch as our federal government, first of all, spends an enormous amount of money on finding ways to kill people, which I don't appreciate, and less money on education. And even some of the money that's being spent on education, some of us question and challenge whether that's the best way to use it. But in the Bay Area, we have a number of people who are totally committed to education and thinking all the time about how to make it better and working in spite of the different financial difficulties on how to make schools work for our kids. So one of those people we have with us today is a school board member from the Oakland Public Schools. Her name is Valerie Batchelor. She's been doing work around schools and other issues for some time, and I want to welcome you to Education Today.
Hi, Kitty Kelly. So glad to be here with you today.
Yes, and we're really glad to have you. And I have a few questions that are very specifically about Oakland schools, and then also, some more general questions about what schools should be like. So one of the things that I know you and some of your compatriots on the school board were very intentional about in this last set of discussions over the last few months. And those were two things that I know of, where you were very intentional about making sure there were no school closings. Now, Oakland has had many school closings. I believe, I might have the numbers wrong, it might be 29 schools, and most of them were in communities where there were a very large number of African American students. That is, it wasn't a lot of hill schools that were getting closed. And so you all said you didn't want any school closings, and you also did not want state control. So Oakland suffered, in my opinion, from state control for 20 years, and you decided that was enough. So can you say a little bit to our listeners about why these two were priorities for you and for the rest of the board, and I guess for the superintendent also?
Thank you. Yeah, I think to me, school closures has just been so extremely harmful to our community because it's really torn schools apart, and it's made it so that Black and brown and disabled students have gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to going to a different school or having to be moved. And so when I first kind of joined this fight, it was around Parker Elementary. That happens to be in my district, in my neighborhood. And I quite literally saw families giving up on education in Oakland and moving elsewhere to other districts. And I knew that regardless of whether we had the facility open or not, that was going to affect our attendance and enrollment, right? Attendance is hugely important to us because that's how we get paid. And so when I committed right then and there to saying that I will not be supporting any school closures because, again, that detrimentally impacts our attendance and enrollment, and that detrimentally impacts our budget. And the second strategy around making sure we had local control, as you mentioned, for over 22 years, we were overseen by the state because of the loan that we took out of over $100 million. That meant services that our students needed, that means supports that our students needed, we could not fulfill because we had to pay that loan back. I said never again. I never wanted to enter that process again because I just saw how our students were impacted by those cuts and by that system. And the other thing about maintaining local control is, again, we as school board directors are elected by the community. That means we are elected by our neighbors here in Oakland, who again charge us with the public education of our students. The folks in Sacramento, the folks in FICMAT, they are not elected. They are independent bodies that do not care about what happens in Oakland. And so they will make decisions that are detrimental to not only our students now, but students for years to come. And I did not want to give up that local control.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about this because I was around when the state took over, and it was a horrendous process. There was absolutely no need for the loan. It didn't have to happen. And the $100 million was 3 times as much as anybody argued was needed. So to just hand out to not the school board, but to a bunch of people that you're mentioning, $100 million to spend however they wanted to without any input from the citizens or from the school board is so outrageous. It's amazing. It's legal, in my opinion. But I also think that as far as I understand, you also need to pay for this service, right? Didn't you have to pay? So FICMAT is the Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team. It's an all-white group, or last time I checked, operating out of Bakersfield, and they tell school districts what to do around the country. And you have to pay them for the privilege of being told what to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had to pay them, and there was also a fiscal trustee that was provided to us, quote unquote, and that person could rescind or reject any of our decisions. And again, these were strictly around our financial decisions, but that person, from my opinion, took a very loose interpretation of finances and, prevented us from doing things that I think, caused more labor struggle with our labor unions and caused other issues that were unintended. But again, I saw those issues clear as day. I advocated against some of those measures, but again, because this person had this control, they were able to rescind or stay our decisions, which again prevents us from the local body from making those decisions that our neighbors, our constituents wanted us to make.
And have any districts like Beverly Hills or Piedmont or Moraga or any of the districts where there's a wealthier population, have any of them been taken over by the state and been deprived of the right to make decisions with the school board?
I believe it's only been districts that have a high population of African American and Latino students, like Compton and I apologize. I'm near the port of Oakland, so
yes.
Some of our trains are going by at the moment.
It's okay.
So
we don't mind. It just reminds us that we're in Oakland. We're good. Go ahead.
But again, I really see this as a way to curb the progress that we could be making with our populations of students by taking away resources from our classrooms. I can't tell you how much money my husband and I spent on his classroom every single year because there just wasn't the resources, right? We were able to do that, but again, not every educator has that privilege, and not every educator should have to,
right.
Especially when there are folks in FICMAT that are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to institute some of these like austerity measures across the state. Right now, I have a colleague in Sacramento, Sac City that I'm talking to, and it's really detrimental what FICMAT and others are doing in that district as well.
And I hope people will follow what's happening in Sacramento. I mean to have them on the show sometime too, because I think they're really resisting being taken over. But it is difficult to resist. And I want to encourage our listeners, if you're interested in fairness and justice on these issues, to take a look at the FICMAT website. It's Fiscal Crisis Management Assistance Team, a bizarre title to start with, but you can see who they are and who they aren't. It's not teachers and parents; it's other folks. So thank you for talking to us about that, because I think it's one of the most important things that happens to poorer school districts in the state of California, and I appreciate that you found it important enough to try to resist having to go back to local control. I know Inglewood is another district which is, has a poor and non-affluent population and also went through some mess with FICMAT. So on other issues, I know one of the important duties that you have as a board member is to think about facilities issues. So can you talk about that a little bit? What does that involve you're doing, and how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have the privilege to be the chair of the facilities committee, which is one of the 4 committees that we have on the school board. And I see that as a 2-prong approach. The first prong is to maintain school facilities so that our students can learn and thrive, and so that our staff could have safe working conditions as well. And then the second prong is to activate our vacant spaces for the community good. And that I take really seriously, because as an Oaklander, as someone who's in community, housing is one of the biggest challenges our community is facing at the moment. It's such a big challenge that Oakland Kids First just did a survey of over 2,000 young people from middle school to high school. Their number one concern, again, this is 6th graders to 12th graders, their number one concern is housing.
Wow.
Not only how to keep their own family housed,
wow,
but also like how they're going to be able to afford housing when they get out into the workforce or after college. And so that to me says we need to be activating these spaces for affordable housing to stabilize our families and to keep people in Oakland that want to stay in Oakland. Again, those are the kind of 2 different ways, and we're using Measure Y funds as well to maintain our school facilities. We now had a groundbreaking at MAC, so we're starting that project. I know that that's a long-awaited project from the community.
Yes.
We also just did a groundbreaking at Coliseum College Prep, which I'm very excited about, because it'll not only bring new facilities to the community, but it'll bring high school level facilities to our high school students who have been excelling even with the facilities that they currently have. And it'll also incorporate a lot of our climate work as well. There will be no boilers, no heaters. There will be heat pump systems.
Really?
And each classroom will have climate control. I know it seems like I'm like literally we're bringing the future to Deep East Oakland, which is something I'm really excited about. And we're also working with the Fund for Oakland Children and Youth to rebuild the Garfield campus anew. Because I know that folks have had a lot of issues, have identified many issues on that campus, and we are going to pour a little bit of cash into it. But when we looked at what is actually needed, it would be a full rebuild. And I am very excited to say that we will be fully rebuilding the Garfield campus to support those families and students in that neighborhood.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, a lot of the Oakland schools are quite old because it's an older city than the suburbs. So being able to do something about the facility seems important. And are you building these climate things into all these different projects? That's wonderful. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're building in because, in 2020, we passed a climate emergency resolution that called upon our facilities team to make sure that if we're moving forward in any major projects, that they have climate-friendly solutions that are attached to those projects. So we've been doing a lot of solar projects in different school sites. That not only providing us with resources by being able to use our solar panels, but that is also helping us in our general fund and being able to lower our PG&E costs throughout the district. But that also means in places where we're doing full rebuilds, such as MAC and CCPA, we're incorporating a system called heat pumps. So basically the way that it works is that in the summertime, you can turn it on and it'll pull air out from outside. It'll pull cool air from the outside in. And so it'll act like air conditioning. And in the wintertime, it does the opposite, where it'll pull hot air inside so that it'll heat the building.
Wow.
Again, this is a new climate technology that we're happy to start kind of innovating and including into our projects. One other thing that I've heard loud and clear from our high school team is that we need to make sure that we have private bathrooms for our students because we have so many students that, again, just get bullied. You know, there's all kinds of things that happen in our bathrooms, and we all remember high school, and we all remember the things that we did. So in some of our projects, we're also incorporating single stall bathrooms so that students have the privacy of their own space, and then the sinks and other things that we'll need are going to be on the outside. That is also helping us make sure that we can monitor situations that may be happening in the bathrooms. So again, those are just the different ways that we're thinking about modernizing our facilities so that we can have the most impact for our students.
Wow, I never imagined private bathrooms in a school. That's a
And they will be
revelation to
unisex.
me. And yes,
Yep,
I do
yep.
both as a student remember the student bathrooms and also as a teacher remember how if there was any
Hmm.
one place that you dreaded something bad would happen, that was the place. So wow, that's some amazing stuff you're talking about. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So another thing I wanted to ask you about, and I also do want to acknowledge how really frightening it is that kids that young are worried about their housing situation, both their own housing and
Hmm.
their future housing. That's pretty scary. But
I
you
think,
know,
quite honestly, that's also coupled with the fears around immigration.
yes.
Because in the work that I do at ACE, we're seeing the cross section of immigration and tenants' rights as a focal point that we're focusing on because there's so many folks that are in fear of what's going to happen to my housing because of the immigration, the anti-immigrant climate that we're seeing, and vice versa. And so as we've been educating both young people and tenants around their rights as tenants and the rights as immigrants, they feel a lot more empowered. And even when I presented to the Oakland Kids First kind of cohort over the summer, they were like, why have we not heard of you? Why are you not at every one of our schools? And I'm like, because this is the beginnings of the conversation that we want to have to make sure that we can work together to advocate for the things that we need. And you all have said loud and clear, you want to advocate around housing, so let's go. Let's do something about housing.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. I'd like to ask you also about there's been an expansion, I think, of the sanctuary policy. So can you
Yes.
first explain to our listeners who aren't all in education? We have, a lot of parents, but other people who are just interested in education who listen to the show. So if you could say something about the sanctuary policy, what it is, and then how it's been expanded.
Yeah, thank you for that. So in the 2010s, we passed a resolution to be a sanctuary school district, and it was mainly focused on immigration, that we weren't going to collect information, that we were going to be inclusive of our community. I wanted to, especially because of the moment that we're living in politically, there was many parents that are new to the district since then. There's many students and staff that were new to the district, and so I wanted to make sure that we both reaffirmed our commitment to our immigrant families as the only immigrant on the school board at the moment, and that we were being inclusive of our LGBTQIA community as the only queer person on the school board. I wanted to make sure that our families knew that they could have a place here, that they were going to be supported and have the services here. And I wanted to make sure that our staff felt like they could be themselves with our students and not have to fear, a Facebook post or something going viral and potentially have, something happen to their employment. And, I worked with community to put that resolution together. We moved it forward. It's the only resolution that we received, from my understanding, a 7-0 vote on this year because we are united as a school community, as a school board, in making sure that our immigrant families feel welcome, that our LGBTQIA students, staff, and families feel welcome. And so I'm just really, really proud of us in being able to do that work, especially because of the political climate that we're in at the moment.
Wow. So what does it say exactly?
So it says that we will, have every single one of our school spaces will be welcome to our immigrant families as well as LGBTQIA families, that there will be no discrimination around race, religion, ethnic background, gender preference, and or sexual orientation. And it also institutes supports the creation of a curriculum to support educators in making sure that their classroom spaces have those goals in mind. And so there are folks that are already in the district team that are working on that curriculum and expanding that curriculum. So they were very proud to be able to then expand it to every school site so that folks had that information and could share it out with the school communities and the staff at those school sites.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.
Uh,
And I think a part of that too is I was also able to work with other school districts around the immigration component. I was able to work with other school districts to um, both have written like signage at every single one of our school sites that says that ICE is not welcomed at the
mm,
school site, that they cannot enter the school premises. And that was really important because, again, as we saw what was going on in LA and Chicago and Minnesota, our educators were really concerned. They're like, what happens if, ICE comes to our school? What is the protocol? So we were able to not only, again, have those very clear signs to direct them basically to our legal department at Marcus Foster Center, and away from the school site, but also to have a clear protocol for every single staff and community member at the school. And thank goodness we did, because we had a bit of a scare at Hoover Elementary a few months ago, and not only did the school site know exactly what to do, and parents were informed right away, but then other community organizations mobilized about 300 community members to show
wow.
up at that school.
Wow.
And, they had signs, they had chants. I've never heard Baby Shark as a part of a chant, but it was beautiful. It was just so beautiful to hear. And, the school community felt really held by our community members here in Oakland. And that's the type of, sanctuary that we're really looking for, and that we really mean when we pass these policies.
And I think all your work to make it known has been effective, because whenever I have a conversation with anybody from any school or anybody, people know what Oakland's policies are. They know that people are not going to be allowed to come into the school. So I think you've been effective in making that really well known. I wanted to ask you something else, kind of about big picture goals. So, um, there, I'm interested in the ways that you want education to change or to be, and how that relates to maybe to U.S. national education policy or to district policy. What are you looking for in terms of how education is, kind of long term for Oakland kids and kids all over the country?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, again, because of the lack of support we're going to be getting from the federal government around education, and what possibilities open up when that happens. And one thing that, especially at the high school level, that we have been moving towards as a district is mastery-based grading. So that would mean that, grades are not going to be used as like a disciplinary measure. Like if you don't get this assignment in on time, or if you're late to class, or, those types of issues, your grade's going to drop. But it would actually be a way to assess whether students have understood the materials, and it doesn't necessarily matter which time they've understood the materials, right? Like, because they are able to then provide enough, information either through like some of the quizzes or homework or assignments in the classroom, that then that educator can assess, like, okay, Valerie just is going to need a little bit more help in this area before the major quiz happens, whereas Kitty is like all the way up here, and maybe I can partner them together to support both of them being able to, develop their better understanding around this specific topic. I think that quite honestly is how the real world works to begin with. Like,
Yeah.
there's no specific assignments that I know of that, if you don't get it done, on time and whatnot, that you get penalized for it. And we are moving more and more towards like a collaborative work. And so as students can work collaboratively, like we want to make sure that students are able to work collaboratively. So when they get into the workforce, they're able to work together with their coworkers to solve specific issues or tackle specific challenges. And I think something like this really also allows us to stop, kind of ranking one child from another, because quite honestly, none of us are the same. We're all very different. And sometimes, again, some of us need a little bit more time, others really can excel, but there's some folks also in between. And how do we support everyone in that classroom? Because as you know, there's about 35 kids, 32 kids in that classroom. that as an educator you have to support. So being able to assess whether or not someone or one of those students or many of those students have reached the mastery of a subject is a lot easier and a lot more equitable way of grading versus, having specific assignments that then have to be turned in at a specific time or else you get penalized for them. So that's one thing I've been really thinking about. I've also really loved this model of internships. I think that NetWest has this great model of like having students, take classes, but also have internships at the high school level, so they can get, again, that like real world experience of like, being in an office. What is it like to have to deal with like an angry customer or something like that, or an angry person in your workplace? And then like, what are some of the things that I, as a young person, can bring to that workplace that maybe they haven't thought of because, I'm of this digital age, but maybe I can start putting together their TikTok channel for this nonprofit that I'm, working with so that they can get more, influence or more supporters. So I really love this idea of how do we get kids to both think about, obviously, the fundamentals like reading, writing, and arithmetic, but then how can we showcase to them how those are going to be used in real life, through real life examples, through mastery-based education.
I think that young people are demonstrating to us by the crisis in attendance that there needs to be some changes in education, because I find young people to be very interested in the world and what's happening in it, but also not so interested in the way we're giving school out right now. In the last 30 seconds that we have, are you involving students, I assume, in some of this planning about how schools should be different, the kinds of things that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, we've been having conversations, again, as a facility chair with students all the time as to what they want to envision, what they want to see. We're involving them every step of the way when we're developing what the projects are going to look like. We're going to start to engage the Skyline community around that over the fall so that we can see what, again, those young people want to see on that campus. I'm also very excited to be working with Oakland Kids First and some of the other students from ACC around the curriculum for Oakland Youth Vote, to make sure that our students get not only understand the importance of voting, but actually get the opportunity to vote. For folks who may not know, Measure QQ allowed them to vote in school board elections.
And we're going to have to wind up, but thank you for that reminder about voting. And I want to share again with our listeners that we've been talking with Valerie Batchelor, who is on the Oakland School Board and has been talking to us about issues in Oakland and around the country educationally. I'm your host, Kitty Kelly Epstein. My co-host, Jaron Epstein, will be back again with us next week. Thank you so much for listening to Education Today, and it's been great to be with you for this conversation. Bye-bye.
and leading scholar of racism and anti-racism, Ibram X. Kendi.
People are facing real challenges in this moment. And what Great Replacement Theory convinces people that the source of your challenges are those other people, or those people who are strangers, or those people you already don't like. And I think that's what makes this theory so dangerous, because people's livelihoods are suffering right now at the hands of the super rich. And some of those people within the super rich are heavily financing politicians to tell people that they're suffering because of people who are suffering even more than they are.
Storytelling for social change, only on KPFA.
This is 94.1 KPFA and 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, everywhere at kpfa.org.